Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Tonight we are doing something different, something longer. We are embarking on a massive wandering journey through the entirety of Greek mythology. But we aren't going to rush. We aren't going to skip the details. In fact, we are going to do the opposite. We are going to slow down time. We are going to spend the next 2 hours together, drifting through the ancient world, from the very first moment of creation to the final fading of the gods. So, this is the perfect time to commit to rest. Put your phone on the charger, turn off the screen, pull the blanket up to your chin. There is no rush to get anywhere. The story will still be here if you fall asleep. In fact, that's the point. I want you to imagine my voice as a slow, steady current, carrying you gently downstream into the dark. So, take a deep breath, hold it for a moment, and let it go. Let's go back, way back. Section 1. The Texture of Chaos. Before there were gods, before there were heroes, before there was even a concept of before, there was chaos. Now, when you hear the word chaos, you probably picture noise. You might picture a busy city street or a storm or a messy desk. But the Greek word chaos implies something else entirely. It relates to the English word chasm. It wasn't a mess. It was a gap, a void. Imagine floating in a space that has no dimensions. There is no up, no down, no left, no right. There is no light to see by, but there is also no darkness, because darkness is defined by the absence of light, and light hasn't been invented yet. It is a realm of pure, heavy potential. If you were to reach out your hand in chaos, you wouldn't touch anything. No wind would brush against your skin. No sound would reach your ears. It is a silence so profound that it feels like a physical weight pressing against your eardrums, a silence that has lasted for eternity. This state of non-existence persisted for aeons. It was a sleepy, dormant universe, waiting for a reason to wake up. It is the ultimate form of rest. Nothing to do, nowhere to be, just existing in the gap.
Section 2. The earth breathes, and then, without a sound, the first solid thing emerged. Gaia, the earth. She didn't explode into being. Think of it more like a heavy, settling sigh. One moment there was nothing, and the next there was. Ground. Gaia was broad-bosomed and sure. She was the foundation. Imagine the sensation of gravity appearing for the first time. Suddenly, there is a down. Massive tectonic plates drifted into existence, grinding slowly against each other. Granite, limestone, basalt. The mountains didn't shoot up. They rose with the slowness of growing plants, inch by inch, pushing their gray peaks into the void. Valley floors deepened, creating bowls of shadow. Gaia was alone in this newness. She was the landscape of reality. If you were standing on her surface then, you would feel the cold, hard stone beneath your bare feet. The air was still thin, crisp, and utterly motionless. There were no trees yet to rustle, no oceans to crash against the shore, just the endless, silent rolling hills of gray and brown rock, stretching out into infinity. But Gaia was not the only thing to emerge from chaos. Beneath her, deep inside the pockets of the earth, Tartarus formed. Tartarus was the inverse of Gaia. If Gaia was the floor, Tartarus was the cellar, a damp, misty, gloomy pit that stretched as far beneath the earth as the earth stretched beneath the sky. Imagine a cave so deep that if you dropped a bronze anvil from the entrance, it would fall for 9 days and 9 nights before hitting the bottom. That is the depth of Tartarus. It is a place of thick, swirling mists and stale air, a place where the roots of the earth and the sea remain tied in knots. And finally, there was Eros. Eros is often depicted later as a little cherub with a bow and arrow Cupid. But in the beginning, Eros was not a person. Eros was a force. A law of physics. Eros was the concept of attraction, gravity, the pull that brings two things together to create a third. Without Eros, the universe would have remained a collection of lonely, floating rocks. Eros was the energy that allowed creation to begin. Section 3. The sky as a ceiling. Gaia, the lonely earth, looked out at her gray, silent domain. And she desired a companion, a cover, a blanket, so she spun from her own essence, a being equal to herself. Uranus. The sky. Now, imagine the sky today. It feels far away, doesn't it? But in the early days of myth, the sky was a physical presence. Uranus was a vast, domed roof, studded with the very first stars, cold, sharp pinpricks of light that didn't twinkle, but stared fixedly down at the world below. Uranus didn't just hang above Gaia. He embraced her. The sky pressed down upon the earth. It was a tight, suffocating closeness. Every valley was filled with sky. Every mountain peak brushed against the stars. It was the first marriage, the union of the solid and the ethereal. And from this closeness, the weather began. Rain fell for the first time long. Gray sheets of water drumming against the bare rock. Tap, 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 tap. The water pooled in the hollows of Gaia's body, forming Pontus, the sea. The sea was not yet the blue, vacation-friendly ocean we know. It was dark, wine dark, as Homer would later call it. A churning, restless body of water that crashed against the silent cliffs, creating the first rhythm of the world. Whoosh, crash, whoosh, crash. Section 4. The children of stone and star. In the darkness where earth and sky met, life began to stir. Gaia and Uranus produced children. But these weren't human children. They were elemental giants. The Titans, there were 12 of them, vast beings who represented the primary forces of this new world. Think of Oceanus. He wasn't just a god of the water. He was the river, a massive, serpent-like current of fresh water that encircled the entire world, flowing back into himself. A river with no beginning and no end, moving in a slow, hypnotic circle. Think of Hyperion, the pillar of the east, the father of lights. He was the brightness that comes before the sun. Think of Mnemosyne, the lady of memory. In a world before writing, before computers, she was the archive. She sat in silence, remembering every raindrop that fell, every stone that shifted. And Cronus, the youngest, the most watchful. He sat in the shadows of his mother's caverns, listening to the grinding of the tectonic plates, waiting. But Gaia kept birthing, and the children became stranger. The Cyclopes emerged, Brontes thunder, Sterops lightning, and Arges brightness. They were master craftsmen. Imagine the sound of their heavy footsteps. Thud, thud. They had a single, round eye in the center of their foreheads, burning like a furnace door. They were loud, rough, and skilled. And then, the Hikato, Ncheires. The hundred-handed ones. Try to visualize a creature with 50 heads and 100 arms, a swirling mass of limbs and faces. When they moved, it sounded like a landslide, rumble, clatter, crash. They were pure chaotic strength. Uranus, the sky, looked down at these loud, monstrous children, and he felt revulsion. He was a being of pure starlight and order. He didn't want these messy, noisy things in his domain. So he did something terrible. As each child was born, he pushed them back. He shoved them deep into the caverns of Gaia, burying them alive within the earth. He refused to let them see the light of the stars. Imagine the claustrophobia, trapped in the dark, warm pressure of the earth, surrounded by hundreds of flailing arms and crying voices, unable to move. Section 5. The Sickle of Flint. Gaia was in agony. She was heavy with her trapped children. She felt their movements inside her crust the tremors, the quakes. She groaned, a sound that echoed through the valleys. She realized that Uranus would never stop. He would cover her forever, stifling all life, pressing down with his starry weight. She needed space. She reached into her own body, into the veins of the earth, and she extracted a new element, gray adamant, flint. She sat in the dark and chipped away at the stone. Click, dot, click, dot, click. She shaped it into a sickle, a curved blade, with jagged teeth, sharp enough to slice through the fabric of reality. She called her Titan sons to her. She showed them the blade. "Your father is cruel," she whispered, her voice like rustling leaves. "Who will help me punish him?" Oceanus flowed away, not wanting to get involved. Hyperion dimmed his light. They were afraid. Uranus was the sky. He was everywhere. How do you fight the ceiling of the world? But Cronus stepped forward. Cronus, the crafty one. The one who understood that for something new to begin, something old must end. "I will do it, mother," he said. His voice was low and rough, like stones rubbing together. He took the sickle. Its edge glinted in the twilight. And then he waited. We are back in the cavern. The air is still. The only sound is the slow, rhythmic breathing of the earth. Gaia, waiting for the sun to go down. Cronus is there, hidden in the folds of the earth, holding the sickle of gray flint. Now, try to imagine the texture of that handle. It is rough, unpolished stone. It is cold against his palm. His knuckles are white, not from fear, but from a tense ancient resolve. He is the youngest Titan, the one who watches, the one who waits. Night begins to fall. But in this early age, night doesn't just happen. It arrives. Uranus, the sky descends. It is a slow, cosmic movement. Imagine a blanket of stars lowering itself down toward the ground. The darkness thickens. The air pressure rises. The mountains seem to bow their heads under the weight of the heavens coming home to rest. The sky settles upon the earth, covering every valley, filling every canyon with his presence. It is the heavy, suffocating embrace of a jealous father who refuses to let his children breathe. Cronus waits until the moment of total stillness, when the wind has stopped, when the last bird has gone quiet, when the sky is fully relaxed, thinking his dominion is absolute. Then, Cronus moves. He steps out from the shadow. He raises the jagged flint blade. He strikes. We won't dwell on the gore, that's not what we're here for. Instead, focus on the sound. It sounds like a sheet of canvas tearing in a storm. R-I-I-I-I-I-I-I-I-P dot. A great shuddering gasp echoes through the universe. Uranus screams not a human scream, but the sound of thunder rolling across 1,000 miles. And then, the most important thing happens. He pulls away. For the first time in eternity, the sky recoils from the earth. He lifts himself up, higher and higher, retreating in pain and shock. Suddenly, there is space. The crushing weight is gone. The atmosphere rushes in to fill the gap. The mountains stretch upward, finally free to stand tall. The trees, which had been bent low, straighten their trunks. Cronus stands there, the sickle in his hand, watching his father ascend into the distant blackness, where he remains to this day. The separation is complete. The world finally has a ceiling, not a lid. Section 7. From foam and blood, but an act like that leaves a mark. Drops of Uranus's divine blood fell from the sky, raining down onto Gaia, the earth. Where they landed, strange things grew. This is the birth of the Furies, the Aryn. They rose from the soil, avenging spirits with eyes that wept blood and breath that smelled of old copper. But they didn't scream. They just stood there, waiting for the first crime to be committed so they could punish it. Also born were the giants, massive beings clad in shining armor, holding long spears, sleeping deep in the earth, waiting for a war that wouldn't happen for eons. But not all of the aftermath was dark. One part of Uranus, the severed part, fell into the sea. It hit the water with a heavy splash. The salt water churned, white foam began to gather around it. Ephros, the Greeks called it sea foam. The foam didn't dissipate, it swirled, thickening, glowing with a soft pearlescent light. It drifted. Imagine watching a patch of white foam floating slowly across a dark, calm ocean. It drifted past the island of Scythia. It continued east, carried by the gentle west wind, Zephyrus. The wind blew softly, puffing its cheeks, guiding the foam toward the island of Cyprus. And as it touched the shore, the foam parted. Aphrodite stepped out. She was fully grown. She didn't stumble. She walked onto the sand, and where her bare feet touched the beach, grass and flowers sprang up instantly. She was the goddess of beauty, love, and desire. But she was born from violence. This is something the Greeks understood well. Love and pain are relatives. They come from the same wound. She dried her hair in the wind, put on a necklace of gold, and the seasons themselves danced around her. The world had just become significantly more complicated, and significantly more beautiful. Section 8. The Golden Age of Boredom. Meanwhile, back on dry land, Cronus was now the king. He freed his brothers and sisters, the Titans. They stretched their limbs, thanked him, and took their places as the pillars of the cosmos. Hyperion took the sun, Oceanus took the water, Rhea took the earth beside Cronus. And this is a big but. Cronus did not free the monsters. He looked at the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones, still trapped in the basement of Tartarus. And he said, "You guys are too ugly and too loud. Stay there." He locked the door and threw away the key. That decision would come back to haunt him later. But for now, he felt secure. This era is known as the Golden Age of Man. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But let's really look at it. It was a time of perpetual spring. No winter winds, no scorching summer heat. Just a mild, room temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 Celsius, all year round. The earth produced food automatically. You didn't have to plow a field. You didn't have to water a seed. You just walked outside, and there was a wheat field. You reached up, and an apple fell into your hand. Acorns dripping with honey fell from oak trees. People lived for hundreds of years. They didn't age. They looked like 30-year-olds until the day they died. And when they died, they just fell asleep. No pain, no sickness. They just lay down in the clover and drifted off, becoming spirits of the air. There were no laws, because there was no crime. There was no money, because everyone had everything. There were no ships, because no one needed to import anything. It was perfect. It was also incredibly boring. Nothing happened. There was no struggle, and without struggle, there were no stories. It was a stagnant paradise, ruled by a king who sat on his throne of obsidian, watching the days blur into one another, terrified of change. Section 9. The cycle of swallowing. Cronus ruled, but he was not at peace. He remembered his father's curse. You too will be overthrown by your own child. This thought grew in his mind like a weed. It wrapped around his thoughts. He looked at his wife, Rhea, and he didn't see a partner. He saw a threat. Rhea became pregnant. She gave birth to a beautiful daughter, Hestia. Hestia was the goddess of the hearth, the home, the fire that keeps us warm. She was gentle and kind. Cronus looked at the baby. He looked into her eyes and saw the future, a future where he was no longer king. He opened his mouth. He didn't chew. He unhinged his jaw like a great serpent. Gulp. Hestia was gone, swallowed whole. Now, Pause and imagine the physiology of this. Hestia didn't die. She was immortal. She just slid down into the cavernous stomach of her father. She sat there, in the dark, unharmed but imprisoned. A god living inside a god. Rhea screamed. She cried. But Cronus was stone-faced. "It is necessary," he said, "for the stability of the cosmos." Then came Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. Rhea tried to hide her, but Cronus found her. Gulp. Then came Hera, the goddess of royalty. Gulp. Then came Hades, the dark one. Gulp. Then came Poseidon, the stormy one. Gulp. 5 children, 5 gods, trapped in the belly of the king. Cronus grew heavier. He moved slower. He sat on his throne, bloated with his own legacy, thinking he had cheated fate. But fate is not something you cheat. Fate is the house, and the house always wins. Section 10. The Stone in the Cloth. Rhea was desperate. She was pregnant again. The 6th child. She felt him kicking inside her. She knew this one was different. This was Zeus. She couldn't bear to lose another one. So she went to her mother, Gaia, for help. "Hide me," she whispered to the earth. Gaia guided Rhea to the island of Crete. Crete is a rugged place. High mountains, deep valleys, thick forests of cypress and oak. There, in the dead of night, on the slopes of Mount Ida, Rhea gave birth. She didn't have time to hold the baby. She handed him to the nymphs of the mountain. She handed him to the goat, Amalthea. "Keep him quiet," she begged. Then, she did something clever, something desperate. She picked up a stone. It was a smooth, oblong stone, about the size of a newborn baby. It was called the Omphalos. She wrapped it in layers of soft, golden swaddling cloth. She held it to her chest as if it were precious. She flew back to Othries, the mountain fortress of the Titans. She walked into the throne room. Her hands were trembling, but she hid them in the folds of the cloth. Cronus looked up. His eyes were dark and suspicious. "Give him to me," he rumbled. Rhea stepped forward. She held out the bundle. Cronus didn't check. He didn't pull back the blanket to count the toes. He was so arrogant, so sure of his power, that he just opened his mouth. He took the bundle. He swallowed the stone. It must have been heavy. It must have felt cold going down. But Cronus just patted his stomach. Satisfied. Done, he thought. The prophecy is broken. He went to sleep. A deep, heavy sleep of the self-righteous. Meanwhile, far away, in the damp, echoing cave on Crete, a baby began to cry. And outside the cave, the Crete's warrior spirits began to dance, clashing their spears against their shields. Clang dot crash, clang clang. They made a wall of noise to drown out the sound of the future king, who was drinking goat's milk and plotting the end of the Golden Age. Section 11. Honey and Bronze. Time moves differently in myths. While Cronus slept on his throne, years flowed like water around the island of Crete. Zeus grew up. He wasn't raised in a palace. He was raised in a cave, surrounded by the smell of damp limestone and pine needles. He drank the milk of Amalthea, the divine goat. It was rich and sweet. He ate honey that bees distilled from the wildflowers of Mount Ida, and he listened. He listened to the stories of the old world, stories about his father, the child eater, and his uncles, the prisoners. He grew strong. Not just physically, but mentally. He learned that brute force isn't always the answer. Sometimes you need a plan. When he came of age, he didn't storm Mount Othries with a sword. He went to Metis, the Titaness of wisdom. Metis was clever. Her name literally means the planning one. She told Zeus, "Don't fight him yet. Make him weak first." She went into the meadows and gathered herbs. Strange, bitter herbs that made the stomach turn. She mixed them into a potion. It was thick, dark, and smelled faintly of mustard and old wine. Zeus took this potion. He disguised himself. He wrapped a simple cloak around his shoulders and traveled to the court of his father. He got a job as the cupbearer. Imagine the irony. The son Cronus thought he had eaten was now pouring his wine. Cronus didn't recognize him. Why would he? He thought Zeus was a rock inside his stomach. One night, after a long feast, Zeus handed Cronus the golden cup mixed with the potion. Cronus took a long, deep draught. He wiped his mouth. He sighed. And then, his face turned pale. Section 12. The Great Release. It started as a rumble in his belly, like an earthquake deep underground. Cronus doubled over. First came the stone, the OMPHALOS. It hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud, and then the impossible happened. Out came the children. Poseidon, shaking the wine from his hair, already holding the energy of the ocean in his eyes. Hades, silent, dark, blinking in the torchlight. Hera, Demeter, Testia. They were alive, they were grown, and they were unharmed, because they were immortal gods. Digestion had no power over them. They had just been waiting in the dark, preserving their strength. The reunion was brief. There were no long hugs. They looked at Zeus, the brother they had never met, and they knew. They knew the golden age was over. The war had begun. They fled the palace of Othries and established their own headquarters on the highest peak in Greece. Mount Olympus. Section 13. The Stalemate of Thunder. The war that followed is called the Titanomachy. It lasted for 10 years. Now, when we say war, don't imagine a constant battle. Imagine a siege of nature itself. On one side, Mount Othries stood the Titans, massive, ancient, elemental beings. They threw boulders that crushed forests. On the other side, Mount Olympus, stood the new gods, quicker, smarter, but younger. For 10 years, the world was locked in a stalemate. If you were a human living then, though humanity was scarce and hiding in caves, you would have looked up and seen the sky flashing with strange lights. You would have felt the ground shaking every day at noon. It was a war of attrition. Zeus threw lightning bolts, but they bounced off the Titan's skin. The Titans roared, but they couldn't reach the peak of Olympus. It was exhausting, it was loud, and it was going nowhere. Gaia, the earth, finally spoke to Zeus. She was tired of the noise. She was tired of her surface being trampled. You cannot win with strength alone. She whispered from the soil. You need the prisoners. Zeus remembered the stories. The uncles. The monsters Cronus had left in the basement. The Cyclopes, and the 100-handed ones. Section 14. Into the abyss. To win the sky, Zeus had to go underground. He descended. He traveled past the roots of the mountains, past the underground rivers of Styx and Acheron. He went down into the misty gray gloom of Tartarus. The gates were bronze, the walls were iron. Inside, chained in darkness, were the Cyclopes and the Hecatons. They had been there for eons. They were bored, angry, and very, very strong. Zeus stood before them. He didn't mock them. He offered them nectar and ambrosia, the food of the gods. I am not my father, Zeus said. If you fight for me, you will be free. The Cyclopes, with their single eyes glowing in the dark, looked at each other. They nodded. They were master smiths, and they wanted to show their gratitude. Right there, in the depths of hell. They set up a forge. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of divine hammers hitting divine anvils echoed through the abyss. They made 3 gifts, 3 weapons that would define the next age of history. For Hades. They forged a helmet. It looked simple, perhaps made of dark metal. But when Hades put it on, he vanished. It was the helm of darkness. It didn't just make you invisible. It made you silent, unnoticeable, a shadow among shadows. For Poseidon, they forged a trident, a 3-pronged spear tuned to the frequency of the earth. If he struck the ground with it, he could shatter rocks. If he struck the water, he could summon a storm, and for Zeus, they caught the lightning. They hammered pure electricity into solid bolts. The thunderbolt, a weapon of light and judgment. Section 15. The reign of mountains. Armed with these new toys, the Olympians returned to the surface. The final battle was not a duel. It was an bombardment. The hecatontures, the hundred-handed ones, took their positions on the cliffs. They picked up rocks, not pebbles. Boulders, the size of houses. With 100 arms, they could throw hundreds of rocks at once. Imagine the sky turning black, with flying stone. It was a rain of granite. Boom, 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 boom. The Titans on Mount Othrys looked up. For the first time in their immortal lives, they felt fear. They were pelted. They were buried. While they were distracted by the rocks, Zeus unleashed the lightning. The sky turned white. The air smelled of ozone. Poseidon struck the earth, shaking their balance. Hades, invisible, moved among them, disarming them before they even knew he was there. It was over. The Titans Cronus, Iapetus, Hyperion, were defeated. They weren't killed. Gods cannot die. They were bound in chains. And in a cruel twist of irony, Zeus cast them down into the very prison they had refused to open. Tartarus. The hundred-handed ones, who used to be the prisoners, now became the jailers. They stood guard at the bronze gates, making sure the old order never rose again. Silence fell over the battlefield. The dust settled. The golden age was gone. The age of the Olympians had begun. Section 16. The game of chance. The war was won, but who would rule? There were 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. They could have fought for the throne. They could have started another war. But they were tired. They wanted order, so they decided to leave it to fate. They drew lots. It's a strange image. 3 glowing, powerful gods, standing on the peak of Olympus, shaking a helmet with 3 pebbles inside, playing a game of chance to decide the future of the universe. The first lot was drawn. Zeus. He got the sky, the king of the gods, the lord of rain and clouds. It was the highest prize. He would sit on the throne of marble and gold. The second lot was drawn. Poseidon. He got the sea. It was a vast kingdom, full of monsters and mysteries. But it was lonely. He would leave Olympus to build his palace beneath the waves, surrounded by coral and silence. The third lot fell to Hades. He got the underworld, the land of the dead, the subterranean realm where the sun never shines. Hades didn't complain. He didn't rage. He was a cold, pragmatic figure. He accepted his duty. He turned his back on the sunlight and descended into the earth, knowing he would rarely see his brothers again. The earth itself, Gaia and Mount Olympus, were declared common ground, neutral territory, where all gods could roam. But the hierarchy was set. Zeus sat on the throne. He looked down at the battered, empty world. The forests were burned. The animals were hiding. Now, he thought, we need to fill it. Section 17. The Prometheus problem. Not all Titans were imprisoned. A few had sided with Zeus. Most notably, Prometheus Foresight and his brother Epimetheus Hindsight. Zeus gave them a task. Create life. Zeus commanded. Fill the earth with creatures that will worship us. Epimetheus started first. He was enthusiastic but not very bright. He took clay and started making animals. He made the lion. I give you strength and claws, he said. Section 18. The coldest night. Let's go back to the humans. They were huddled in caves at the base of the mountains. Imagine a world without heat. The sun goes down, and the temperature plummets. The darkness isn't just an absence of light. It's a physical threat. Men and women crowded together, shivering. listening to the wolves howl outside. They ate raw roots and cold meat. They spoke in grunts. They were frightened, miserable, and barely surviving. Prometheus watched them from a distance. He stood on a high ridge, wrapping his cloak tight against the wind. He saw the creatures he had shaped from clay, his masterpieces, like scared rodents. He looked up at Mount Olympus. The peak glowed up there. The gods were feasting. Hephaestus, the smith god, had a forge that burned day and night. The hearth of Hestia crackled with eternal golden flames. It wasn't fair. Zeus sat in warmth while his creations froze. Prometheus made a decision. He found a stalk of giant fennel now. If you've never seen giant fennel, it's a tall plant with a thick, hollow stem. Inside, it has a pith that burns slowly. Like a natural fuse, it can hold an ember for hours without burning the outside shell. He waited for nightfall. Section 19. The silent heist. He climbed Olympus. He didn't take the main road. He climbed the back way. Over the jagged rocks, where the clouds cling to the stone, he crept into the workshop of Hephaestus. The smith god was asleep. The bellows were quiet, but the coals in the forge were still glowing deep, pulsing red eyes in the dark. Prometheus knelt. He took his fennel stalk. He touched the tip to the coals. Hiss. A tiny spark jumped. The pith caught fire. It glowed orange. Hidden safely inside the green tube, Prometheus stood up. He hid the stalk in his tunic. He didn't run. Running attracts attention. He walked, calmly, quietly, carrying the secret of the gods in his pocket. He descended the mountain. He went to the nearest human settlement. He gathered a pile of dry leaves and twigs. He broke the fennel stalk. He tipped the glowing ember onto the leaves. He blew on it. Whoosh! A flame burst forth. The humans backed away in terror. They had only seen fire in lightning, a weapon of Zeus. But Prometheus sat by it. He held out his hands. He showed them the warmth. Slowly, one by one, they came closer. That night, for the first time in history, humanity slept warm. The smell of cooked meat drifted into the air. The darkness was pushed back. Section 20. The Eagle and the Rock. Zeus looked down from Olympus. He saw the lights. Little orange dots scattered across the dark valleys of Greece. He knew instantly what had happened. His rage was cold and absolute. He didn't scream. He simply summoned his guards. Kratos' strength and Bioforce. Take him, Zeus said. They dragged Prometheus to the ends of the earth, to the Caucasus Mountains, the desolate, wind-swept range where the rock is black and the ice never melts. Hephaestus was forced to forge the chains. He didn't want to, he liked. Prometheus, but you don't say no. To Zeus. Clink. 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 They chained the Titan to the cliff face. His arms spread wide, bound in unbreakable adamant. Zeus sent an eagle, the hound of Zeus. Every day, the eagle would descend. It would tear at Prometheus's liver. Because he was immortal, he couldn't die. Every night, under the freezing stars, the wound would heal, the liver would grow back, and at dawn, the eagle would return. Prometheus stood there for generations. He never begged for mercy. He stared at the horizon, possessing the one thing Zeus didn't have, the knowledge of the future. He knew that one day, a hero would come to free him, but he would have to wait. Section 21. The beautiful trap. Zeus wasn't finished. He had punished the thief. Now he had to punish the receivers of the stolen goods. Humanity. But Zeus was clever. He didn't want to just destroy them. He wanted them to suffer. He wanted them to accept their punishment willingly. He ordered Hephaestus to mix earth and water. He ordered the gods to contribute gifts. Athena gave her a silver gown and an embroidered veil. Aphrodite gave her grace and desire, that kind of beauty that hurts to look at. Hermes gave her a voice and a deceptive mind. They named her Pandora, all gifted. She was the first woman. Before her, men had lived alone. Don't ask about the biology of that. Myths are weird. Zeus gave her a wedding present. A jar. Wait, let me correct that. In the original Greek, it was a pithos, a large ceramic storage jar, often used for wine or grain. It was heavy, earthen, with a thick, sealed lid. Take this, Zeus said, but never, ever open it. Hermes took Pandora down to earth. He presented her to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Now, Prometheus had warned his brother, never accept a gift from Zeus. But Epimetheus, whose name means hindsight, looked at Pandora. She was radiant. She was charming. She was perfect. He forgot the warning. He married her. And for a while, they were happy. Section 22. The lid lifts. The jar sat in the corner of their house. It gathered dust. Pandora walked past it every day. Zeus had designed her to be curious. It was a feature, not a bug. She wondered what was inside. Gold, jewels, nectar. The wondering became an itch, a compulsion. One quiet afternoon, when Epimetheus was out, she couldn't take it anymore. She approached the jar. Imagine the texture of the ceramic cool and rough under her fingertips. She gripped the heavy lid. She twisted it. Grind the sound of pottery on pottery. She lifted it just an inch. She expected to see gold. Instead, she saw shadows. From the dark interior of the jar, things flew out. They looked like moths, or smoke, or black wind. Sickness flew out, silent and invisible. Toil flew out, heavy and gray. Sorrow, old age, spite, envy. All the miseries that plague humanity today escaped into the room. They buzzed around Pandora's head and flew out the window. Spreading across the world in seconds, Pandora slammed the lid back down. Thud. Her heart was pounding. She started to cry. But then she heard a sound from inside the jar. A small, weak sound. It wasn't buzzing. It was singing. She lifted the lid one last time. Out flew a small, fragile spirit. Elpis. Hope. Zeus had packed hope in the bottom of the jar. Why? To ensure that no matter how much humans suffered, they wouldn't give up. It was the cruelest kindness. Hope allows us to endure the torture. Section 23. The Descent of Ages, with Pandora. The Golden Age was truly dead. The poet Hesiod tells us that history then spiraled downward. After the Golden Age came the Silver Age. These people were not great. They remained children for 100 years, living with their mothers. When they finally grew up, they were foolish and violent. They refused to worship the gods. Zeus got annoyed and buried them underground. Then came the Bronze Age. These men were terrifying. They were made from ash, trees, the wood used for spears. Their armor was bronze. Their houses were bronze. Their hearts were hard as flint. They ate no bread. They only wanted war. They killed each other off until none were left. Then, a brief pause in the decline. The Heroic Age. This is the era we are about to enter in our story. The time of the Demigods. Zeus decided to improve the stock. He started having children with mortal women, much to Hera's fury. These children, Heracles, Perseus, Achilles, were noble. They were stronger than the bronze men, but more just. They would fight the great wars. They would slay the monsters. When they died, they went to the Isles of the Blessed, a paradise at the edge of the world. And finally, us. The Iron Age. Hesiod wrote about this with great sadness. For now truly is a race of iron, and men never rest from labor and sorrow by day, and from perishing by night. In the Iron Age, might makes right. Children dishonor their parents. Oaths are broken. Shame has vanished. It's a bleak assessment, but remember the jar. We are the Iron Age. Yes. We have the toil, the sickness, and the envy. But we also have the hope. Section 24. The stage is set, so now the world is populated. It has fire, it has women, it has misery, it has hope. The gods sit on Olympus, drinking nectar, watching the drama unfold below. But the world is still wild. There are monsters in the forests. There are dragons guarding springs. There are tyrants ruling cities. Humanity needs protection. Humanity needs heroes. And Zeus, looking down at the beautiful, dangerous mess he has created, knows exactly what to do. He turns his gaze to the city of Argos. He sees a princess named Danae, locked in a bronze tower, and he thinks, that looks like the beginning of a good story. He made the eagle. I give you wings and sharp eyes. He made the tortoise. I give you a hard shell for protection. He went down the line, handing out all the best gifts: fur, speed, night vision, shells, venom. By the time he got to the last pile of clay, he realized he had made a terrible mistake. He had run out of gifts. Prometheus looked at the last pile of clay. It was shaped like the god's 2 legs, upright, 2 arms. This was man. But man was pathetic. No fur to keep warm, no claws to fight, no wings to flee. Man stood there, shivering in the cool morning air, completely defenseless. Prometheus looked at his creation, and he felt a pang of pity. He loved them. He saw potential in their fragile forms. He asked Zeus, "Can we give them fire? Just a little, so they don't freeze." Zeus looked down from his high throne. He saw these little mud creatures. "No," Zeus said, "fire is power. If they have fire, they will become arrogant. Let them live in the dark. Let them pray to us for warmth." Prometheus nodded. He bowed. He said nothing. But behind his eyes, a plan was forming. He wasn't going to let his children freeze. He would steal the spark that would ignite human history. But that is a story for the next chapter. Section 25. The Tower of Bronze in the City of Argos. There was a tower. It wasn't made of stone or brick. It was built of bronze slabs, sunk deep into the earth. It had no door, only a small window at the very top, open to the sky. Inside this golden cage lived Danae, a princess. Her father, King Acrisius, had locked her away because of a prophecy. The son of Danae will kill you. So, he thought, if she never sees the sun, she will never have a son. Simple. Danae spent her days watching the square of blue sky turn to black and back to blue again. It was a life of absolute silence. But the sky, The sky belongs to Zeus. One day Danae noticed a change in the light. The sunlight streaming through the roof didn't look like normal sun. It shimmered, it thickened, it turned into a shower of gold. Imagine the sound of rain, but heavy and metallic. Tink. The golden dust swirled around her. Warm and glowing. It wasn't just light, it was presence. It was Zeus. From that golden rain, a child was conceived. Perseus, the first of the great heroes. Section 26. The Lullaby of the Sea. When the king discovered the baby, babies are notoriously hard to hide in echoey bronze towers. He was terrified. But he couldn't kill them directly. The gods punish murder. So he chose the sea. He ordered a large wooden chest to be built, carved from cedar, heavy and watertight. He placed Danae and the infant, Perseus, inside. He nailed the lid shut. Bang, bang, bang. He cast the chest into the ocean. Now, imagine this. From the inside, it is pitch black. You are floating on the vast, indifferent sea. But it isn't violent. The chest is heavy. It sits deep in the water. You feel the slow rhythmic rocking up, and down, up, and down. The sound of the water lapping against the wood is muffled and constant slosh, slosh. It is the ultimate sensory deprivation tank. For days and nights, they drifted. Danae sang lullabies to her son in the dark. The sea, directed by Zeus, kept the water calm. It was a long, dark sleep. Eventually, the chest scraped against sand. Grind. They had washed ashore on the island of Syr. A fisherman named Dictys found them. He pried open the lid, and the blinding white light of the Aegean sun flooded in. Section 27. The Impossible Gift. Years passed. Perseus grew up on the beach. He was strong, golden-haired, and quiet. But peace never lasts for heroes. The king of the island, Polydex, the fisherman's brother, wanted to marry Danae. She refused. Perseus stood in the way. So the king devised a trap. He held a banquet. He demanded a gift of horses from every guest. Perseus, poor and proud, stood up. "I have no horses," he said, "but I will bring you any gift you name." The king smiled. The trap had snapped shut. "Fine," the king said. "Bring me the head of Medusa." The room went silent. Medusa was a gorgon. One look at her face turned living flesh into gray stone. To ask for her head was a death sentence. But a hero's word is bond. Perseus left the hall. He walked down to the shore, looking at the waves, wondering how a mortal man could fight a monster he couldn't even look at. Section 28. Sandals of Wind. He didn't have to wonder long. Two figures appeared on the sand. One was a woman, with gray eyes that looked like storm clouds, Athena. The other was a man with a mischievous smile and winged sandals. Hermes. They liked Perseus. He was their half-brother. After all, they equipped him. Athena gave him a shield. It was polished bronze, so smooth it acted like a high-definition mirror. "Do not look at her," Athena warned. "Look only at this." Hermes gave him a specialized sword, a harp curved like a sickle, sharp enough to cut through bone like butter. But he needed more. He needed to find the nymphs of the north. To find them, he had to visit the Graeae. The Graeae were three old sisters who lived in a cave at the edge of the world. They were born old, gray hair, wrinkled skin, and they shared one eye. Just one eye between the three of them. Perseus crept into their cave. The air smelled of dust and old parchment. He watched them. "Sister, pass the eye," one croaked. He saw the wet, glimmering eye being passed from a wrinkled hand to another. Perseus moved, swift and silent. He intercepted the handoff. He grabbed the eye. "Tell me where the nymphs are," he said, holding their vision hostage. They told him. He gave the eye back, or threw it into a lake, depending on the poet. Let's say he gave it back. He's a hero, not a bully. From the nymphs, he got the final gear. Winged sandals. Imagine the sensation of gravity vanishing. Your feet lift off the grass. The wind catches your heels. You are walking on air. The cap of invisibility, borrowed from Hades. Put it on, and you are gone. No shadow, no reflection, just a void. The Kabizes, a magic bag that can hold anything safely. Section 29. The Garden of Silence. He flew. He flew over the ocean, past the lands of men, to the land of the Hyperboreans, and beyond, to the Isle of the Gorgons. It was a place where the sun was always setting, casting long, golden shadows. He landed softly. The first thing he noticed was the silence. No birds sang, no crickets. Chirped. The second thing he noticed was the statues. There were men standing in the garden, soldiers raising spears, travelers shielding their faces, animals, wolves, lions, boars. They were all made of gray, porous stone. But the detail was horrifying. You could see the fear in their eyes. You could see the tension in their muscles. These weren't carvings. They were victims. Perseus walked through this garden of ghosts. He controlled his breathing. In ... out. He felt the weight of the bronze shield on his arm. Section 30. The reflection. He entered the cave. The Gorgons were sleeping. There were three of them, Steno, Euryale, and Medusa. Only Medusa was mortal. They had wings of gold that shimmered in the gloom. They had hands of brass, and their hair. Perseus heard it before he saw it. The sound of 100 snakes sleeping. A low, dry rustling dot, like dry leaves blowing over pavement. Hiss, dot 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 hiss, dot hiss. He didn't look up. He looked down at his shield. In the reflection, he saw the distorted image of the cave. He saw her. Medusa. She was sleeping with her cheek against the stone floor. The snakes were curled around her face, their tongues tasting the air. She was beautiful, in a terrifying way. But Perseus couldn't hesitate. He hovered above her. Guided by the reflection, he raised the curved sword. He focused on the mirror image. He lined up the strike dot slice. It was clean, immediate. He grabbed the head still, looking away, and shoved it into the magic bag. From the severed neck, 2 miracles sprang forth. Pegasus, the pure white-winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior with the golden sword. They were children of Poseidon, trapped inside her curse. Finally, freed. Pegasus shook his wings, huge, feathered wings that scattered droplets of blood. He neighed, a sound that woke the other 2 sisters. The immortal Gorgons woke up. They screamed. Perseus jammed the cap of invisibility onto his head. He vanished. He soared out of the cave, riding the wind, invisible, silent, leaving the screaming sisters behind him. He flew over the sea, the heavy bag swinging at his side, the blood dripping onto the sands of the Sahara Desert below, turning into vipers. But he was safe. The impossible task was done. Section 31. The Rescue and the Return. On his way back, he saw a woman chained to a rock in Ethiopia, Andromeda. She was a sacrifice to a sea monster, Cetus. Perseus, filled with the adrenaline of his victory, swooped down. He didn't just use his sword. He used the head. He pulled Medusa's head out of the bag and showed it to the sea monster. The massive beast, rising from the foam with teeth like daggers, froze. The gray color spread from its nose to its tail. It turned into a jagged reef of stone. Perseus saved the girl. He married her. Standard hero procedure. He returned to Seriphos. He walked into the banquet hall where King Polydex was still laughing, still harassing his mother. "I brought your gift," Perseus said quietly. The king laughed. "You liar." Perseus closed his eyes. He turned his head away. He pulled the object from the bag. "Look," he said. The king looked. The courtiers looked. In an instant, the laughter stopped. The room became a tomb. The king sat on his throne, a statue of malice, forever frozen in stone. Perseus lowered the head. He put it back in the bag. He returned the sandals to Hermes. He gave the head to Athena, who mounted it on her shield, the Aegis. Perseus lived a long, happy life. He was one of the few heroes who got a happy ending. He founded Mycenae. He died of old age. And when he passed, the gods put him in the stars, alongside Andromeda, forever circling the night sky. Section 32. The strongest baby generations passed after Perseus. The blood of Zeus mingled with mortal lines, thinning out, until it concentrated again in one woman, Alcmene Zeus, looking for a champion to defend both gods and men, stopped time. He made one night last as long as 3. In that extended darkness, Heracles was conceived. From the moment he took his first breath, he was marked by the hatred of Hera. Hera, the queen of heaven, was tired of Zeus's illegitimate children. She couldn't punish Zeus, so she punished the child. One night, when Heracles was just a baby sleeping in his crib alongside his mortal half-brother Iphicles, Hera sent 2 serpents. They slithered into the nursery. Slither. The room was dark. The scales of the snake scraped softly against the floor. Iphicles woke up and screamed, but Heracles just woke up and saw toys. He reached out with his chubby, dimpled baby hands. He grabbed the snakes by the necks. He didn't cry. He didn't struggle. He just squeezed. Imagine the silent, terrifying strength of an infant who doesn't know his own power. When Alcmene rushed into the room, she found Heracles giggling, holding two limp snakes like rattles. The hero had arrived. Section 33. The madness and the silence. But strength does not equal happiness. Heracles grew up, married, and had children. But Hera struck him with a sudden red madness. In a hallucination, he saw his family as enemies. When he woke up from the trance, he was covered in blood, sitting in the ruins of his life. The grief was a heavy physical weight, a cloak of lead that he could never take off. He went to the oracle of Delphi. He asked, "How do I make this right?" The oracle, breathing the vapors of the earth, told him, "Go to your cousin, King Eurystheus. Serve him for 12 years. Do whatever he asks." Eurystheus was a small, petty man. He was terrified of Heracles. He sat on his throne and thought up the hardest, most impossible tasks he could imagine. The 12 labors. He hoped Heracles would die. But Heracles didn't die. He just got to work. Section 34. Texture of the beast. The first labor. The Nemean lion. This wasn't a normal lion. It was a monster whose golden fur was impervious to steel. Arrows bounced off it, like rain off a roof. Swords bent against its skin. Heracles tracked it to a cave with 2 entrances. He blocked one entrance with rocks. He walked into the dark. It was quiet inside, just the heavy, wet breathing of a predator. Heracles realized his weapons were useless. He dropped his club. He threw aside his bow. He wrestled it. Imagine the feeling of grappling with a storm. The lion roared, thrashing, claws tearing at the air. Heracles wrapped his arms around the beast's neck. He squeezed. He held the grip for minutes. Hours maybe. Just holding on, waiting for the air to run out. When the lion finally went limp, Heracles used the beast's own claws to skin it. He wore the pelt as a cloak. The head of the lion became his helmet. He was now armored in the very thing that had tried to kill him. The second labor. The Hydra. A swamp monster with 9 heads. Cut one off. To grow back. This was a labor of heat and humidity. The swamp of Lerna was thick with fog. The mud sucked at his sandals. Schlop. Every time he sliced a neck. The flesh bubbled and doubled. He needed help. His nephew Iolaus brought a torch. As Heracles cut, Iolaus burned the stump with fire. Sizzle. The smell of singed snake meat filled the air. They worked in a rhythm: cut, burn, cut, burn, step, cut, burn, step, until the last head, the immortal one, was buried under a heavy rock. Section 35. The river and the birds. The labors continued. He chased the Cyrenian hind-deer with golden horns for a full year. He didn't hurt it. He just ran. Imagine running for a year. The rhythm of breath. The changing seasons. The endless thud of feet on grass. It was an endurance test of patience. Then, the Augean stables. Eurystheus thought this would humiliate him. Clean the stables, he said. 30 years of manure from immortal cattle. The smell was a wall. Heracles didn't pick up a shovel. He looked at the landscape. He saw 2 rivers flowing nearby. He dug a trench. He broke the stable walls. He diverted the river. Rushed the water roared through the stables. Cool gray mountain water. It scrubbed the stone floors clean in a single afternoon, carrying the filth out to sea. It was the sound of purification. Then, the Stymphalian birds. Man-eating birds with bronze feathers that rattled like metal wind chimes. He couldn't reach them. Athena gave him a rattle. He shook it. ch, ch, ch. The metallic sound echoed off the cliffs. The birds panicked and took flight, blotting out the sun. Heracles picked them off with his bow, one by one. A rhythmic archery practice against the sky. Section 36. The weight of the heavens. Skipping ahead to the 11th labor, we find the most atmospheric moment of Heracles' life. He had to fetch the golden apples of the Hesperids, but he didn't know where they were. He found Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold up the sky. Atlas stood at the edge of the world. His muscles were like old tree roots. He had been holding the heavens for thousands of years. "I'll get the apples," Atlas said. "If you hold this for a minute." Heracles agreed. Atlas shifted his burden. Heracles stepped under the sky. Now, try to imagine the sensation. The weight of the entire cosmos settling onto your shoulders. The stars, the planets, the clouds. The infinite blue dot, it crushed him. His knees buckled, his spine compressed, but he held it. He stood there, sweating, trembling, becoming a pillar of the universe. For a brief moment, he understood what it was to be a god, to carry the responsibility of everything. Atlas came back with the apples. He looked happy. He didn't want the sky back. "I'll just deliver these to the king for you." Atlas smiled. Heracles, straining under the weight, had to think fast. "Sure," Heracles wheezed. "Just hold it for a second, while I adjust my cloak. It's chafing my shoulder." Atlas, not being the smartest Titan, agreed. He took the sky back. Heracles grabbed the apples and walked away. He left Atlas there, holding the silence of the heavens forever. Section 37. The Dog in the Dark. The final labor. The descent into hell. Heracles had to bring back Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the underworld. He found a cave mouth that breathed cold air. He walked down, past the river Styx, past the shades of the dead who fluttered like bats. He stood before the throne of Hades. Hades was pale, regal, and terrifying. "You want my dog?" Hades asked. His voice was like a coffin lid closing. "Yes, uncle," Heracles said. "You can take him," Hades said, "but no weapons. Wrestle him barehanded." Heracles found the dog at the gates. 3 heads, a mane of snakes, a tail like a dragon. Heracles wrapped his arms around the beast's 3 throats. The dog snarled, snapped, and howled. The sound echoed through the caverns of the dead. But Heracles held on. The diamond grip. He dragged the beast all the way up to the surface. When Cerberus saw the sunlight, he vomited from dizziness, and where the vomit landed, poisonous wolfsbane grew. Heracles showed the dog to King Eurystheus. The king was so terrified he jumped into his bronze jar and refused to come out. Heracles sighed, patted the dog, and walked him back down to Hades. Job done. Section 38. The Shirt of Fire. Heracles lived many more years. He joined the Argonauts. He fought giants. He sacked Troy the
first time. But a hero's life is a tragedy in slow motion. He married a woman named Deianira. One day, they were crossing a river. A centaur named Nessus offered to carry Deianira across. Midstream, the centaur tried to kidnap her. Heracles, watching from the bank, drew his bow. He fired an arrow dipped in the hydra's venom. The arrow hit Nessus. As the centaur lay dying, he whispered a lie to Deianira. "Take my blood. It is a love potion. If Heracles ever stops loving you, put it on his clothes." It wasn't a love potion. It was blood mixed with hydra poison. Years later, Deianira got jealous. She soaked a tunic in the blood and sent it to Heracles. He put it on. The poison woke up. It burned his skin like acid. It fused to his flesh. He couldn't take it off. The pain was absolute. He realized his time had come. He climbed Mount Oeta. He built a pyre of oak and pine. He laid down on the wood. He rested. He gave his bow to a friend, Philoctetes, and asked him to light the fire. As the flames rose, Heracles didn't scream. He waited. The fire burned away the mortal part of him, the part from his mother. But the divine part, the part from Zeus, could not burn. A cloud descended. Thunder rumbled. Heracles ascended to Olympus. He reconciled with Hera. He married Hebe, the goddess of youth. After a lifetime of labor, sweating, bleeding, and carrying the weight of the sky, Heracles finally did the one thing he had never done before. He rested. Section 39. The Salt and the Oil. While Heracles was out carrying the weight of the sky, civilization was growing. In the region of Attica, a great city was rising on a rocky outcrop. But it didn't have a name yet. It needed a patron god, a divine sponsor. Two Olympians stepped forward to claim it: Poseidon, the lord of the sea, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom. They decided to hold a contest. The rules were simple. Whoever gives the city the best gift wins. The citizens gathered on the Acropolis, the high city. The wind whipped around the limestone cliffs. Poseidon went first. He raised his trident. He struck the hard rock of the Acropolis. Crack. A spring of water gushed out. The crowd gasped. Water is life, right? They ran to taste it. They spit it out immediately. It was salt water. Poseidon, being the god of the sea, had given a landlocked city a spring of undrinkable brine. Impressive magic? Yes. Practical utility? Zero. Then it was Athena's turn. She didn't strike the earth. She knelt. She planted a seed in the dusty soil. She touched the earth with her spear tip. Slowly, silently, a tree grew. It wasn't a giant oak or a towering pine. It was a gnarled, twisted tree with silvery green leaves that rustled softly in the breeze. An olive tree. Athena explained the gift. This tree will give you wood for your fires. Its fruit will give you food, and its oil. The oil will give you light for your lamps, flavor for your bread, and soap for your bodies. It was the ultimate multi-tool of the ancient world. The citizens voted. It was a landslide. The city was named Athens. Poseidon, in a huff, left, and probably caused a minor flood on his way out. But the olive tree stood there for centuries, a symbol of quiet, enduring wisdom over brute force. Section 40. The Rock and the Sandals. The king of Athens, Aegeus, had no heir. Through a complicated series of events involving travel and prophecies, he ended up sleeping with a princess named Aethra in the town of Troezen. But before Aegeus returned to Athens, he buried two things under a massive, heavy rock: a sword and a pair of sandals. "If you have a son," he told Aethra, "and if he grows strong enough to lift this rock, send him to me." That son was Theseus. Theseus grew up hearing the story of the rock. Every day he walked past it. It was a gray, lichen-covered boulder, sunken deep into the earth. When he was 16, he decided it was time. He didn't use pure rage like Heracles. He used leverage. He braced his legs. He found the fulcrum: grind. The rock shifted. The earth surrendered its secret. Beneath it, dry and dusty but preserved, lay the sword and the sandals. Theseus put them on. He walked the long road to Athens. We'll skip the road trip. He killed a bunch of bandits, including a guy who tied people to pine trees, and a guy who stretched people to fit beds. Procrustes. But the point is, he cleaned up the highway. By the time he reached Athens, he was already a hero. King Aegeus recognized the sword and welcomed his son home. Section 41. The Black Sails. But Athens was not a happy place. Every 9 years, a ship with black sails arrived in the harbor. It came from Crete, the island empire ruled by King Minos. Years ago, a son of Minos had died in Athens. To pay for the blood, Minos demanded a terrible tribute. 7 young men, 7 young women. They were to be sent to Crete, thrown into the labyrinth, and eaten by the Minotaur. The day of the tribute arrived. The black ship sat in the harbor, bobbing ominously on the gray water. The parents of Athens wept. Theseus, being the new prince, couldn't watch this happen. "I will go," he said. "I will be one of the 7. King Aegeus begged him not to. "I have to," Theseus said, "and when I return, I will change the sails. If you see white sails coming over the horizon, you will know I am alive. If the sails are still black, I am dead." The king agreed. Theseus boarded the ship. The rowers pulled. The ship slipped out of the harbor carrying 14 terrified teenagers toward the horizon. Section 42. The Architect's Nightmare. They arrived in Crete. The palace of Knossos was a marvel. Multi-storied, painted with dolphins and bulls, full of light and air. But beneath it lay the labyrinth. It was designed by Daedalus, the greatest inventor in history. Minos had asked him to build a prison for the Minotaur, a creature born of a curse, half man, half bull, fueled by hunger and rage. Daedalus didn't build bars. He built confusion. He built a maze so complex that even he barely escaped it after construction. Corridors that turned back on themselves. Dead ends that looked like exits. Echo chambers that distorted sound so you couldn't tell where the footsteps were coming from. It was a machine for generating panic. Before Theseus was thrown in, he met Ariadne, the daughter of King Minos. She saw Theseus. He was handsome, brave, and doomed. She fell in love instantly. She went to Daedalus. "How does he get out?" she asked. Daedalus handed her a simple object, a ball of thread. "The maze changes your sense of direction," Daedalus explained. "But a thread is a physical memory. It remembers where you came from." Section 43. Into the Stone Throat. That night, Ariadne went to Theseus's cell. She gave him the thread. She gave him a sword. "Don't let go," she whispered. Theseus walked to the entrance of the labyrinth. It was a giant archway of stone, breathing out cold, damp air. He tied one end of the string to the doorpost. He stepped inside. The darkness swallowed him. He walked, step, step, pause. He let the string unspool through his fingers. It was a thin, fragile lifeline in the dark. The air smelled of old dust and something muskier, the scent of a large animal. He walked for hours, left turn, right turn, long straightaway. Sometimes he thought he heard breathing behind him. He would stop, heart pounding against, his ribs raising his sword. Silence. Just the drip of water from the ceiling. Plip. The psychological weight of the maze was heavier than the ceiling. It whispered to him, "You are lost. You will never see the sun again." But the string was real. He felt the tension in it. It anchored him to reality. Finally, he reached the center. It wasn't a throne room. It was a pit of bones. And there, sleeping in the shadows, was the Minotaur. A man's body, rippling with unnatural muscle. The head of a bull, heavy and matted with fur. The beast woke up. It snorted, a wet guttural sound. It charged. The fight was brutal, clumsy, and dark. It wasn't a graceful duel. It was a desperate scramble on a slick stone floor. Theseus didn't use magic. He used the sword Ariadne gave him. He struck. The beast bellowed, a sound that shook the dust from the ceiling, and fell. The breathing stopped. The maze was silent again. Section 44. The Thread of Memory. But killing the monster is only half the job. Now, he had to get out. In the dark, every hallway looks the same. Without the string, he would have died there, standing over the corpse of his enemy. He began to wind the thread back up, hand over hand. He followed the white line through the gloom. It took hours, but eventually the air grew warmer. The smell of salt water replaced the smell of musk. He saw the moonlight. He stepped out. He was covered in sweat and dust, but he was alive. He gathered the other Athenians. He grabbed Ariadne. They ran to the harbor, stole their ship, and sailed away into the night. Section 45. The Forgetful Hero. They stopped at the island of Naxos to rest. They slept on the beach, exhausted. And here, we reach the part of the story that makes everyone dislike Theseus. When the sun rose, Theseus gathered his crew. He hoisted the sails. He left. But Ariadne was still sleeping on the sand. Why? Some poets say the god Dionysus appeared in a dream and demanded Ariadne for himself, threatening Theseus if he didn't leave. Others say Theseus was just callous and didn't want to bring a foreign princess back to Athens. Either way, Ariadne woke up alone. She saw the ship vanishing over the horizon. She wept. Don't worry too much about her. Dionysus found her, married her, and made her a goddess. She actually got a better deal. But the gods punish betrayal. Or perhaps Theseus was just distracted by guilt. As the ship approached Athens, Theseus forgot one thing: the sails. He had promised his father he would switch the black sails to white if he survived. But the black sails were still flapping in the wind. King Aegeus was standing on the highest cliff of the Acropolis, watching the sea. He had been watching for weeks. He saw the ship. He saw the black sails. "He is dead," the king whispered. Grief overtook him. He didn't wait for the ship to dock. He threw himself from the cliff into the swirling waters below. He died in the sea, and forever after, that body of water, the blue island-filled expanse between Greece and Turkey, was known as the Aegean Sea. Theseus landed. He was king now, but his crown was bought with the life of his father and the heart of the woman who saved him. He ruled Athens well. He invented democracy, sort of. He unified the region, but he would always be the hero who navigated the labyrinth but got lost on the way home. Section 46. The Man with One Sandal. Before the Trojan War, before the Odyssey, there was the voyage of the Argo. It began in the kingdom of Iolcus. The king, Peleus, was a usurper. He was nervous. An oracle had told him, "Beware the man with one sandal." So Peleus spent years staring at people's feet. One day, a young man named Jason arrived in town. Jason was the rightful heir, but he had been raised in the mountains by Chiron the centaur. On his way to the city, Jason had to cross the river Anaros. The river was swollen with rain. The mud was thick and sucking. As Jason waded across, the current pulled at his legs. He fought the water. He scrambled up the bank, but he left something behind. His left sandal remained stuck in the riverbed mud. He walked into the city square, wearing one sandal and one bare foot. King Peleus saw him and went pale. But Peleus was crafty. He didn't arrest Jason. He invited him to dinner. "If you want my throne," Peleus said, swirling his wine, "you have to prove you can lead. Go to the edge of the world. Go to Colchis. Bring me back the golden fleece." The golden fleece was the skin of a magical flying ram. It hung in a sacred grove in Colchis, modern-day Georgia, guarded by a dragon that never slept. It was an impossible task. It was a suicide mission. Jason, being young and eager for glory, said, "Okay." Section 47. The Ship of Dreams. Jason needed a ship, but not just any ship. He needed a vessel that could survive the unknown. He hired Argus, a master shipwright. They went to the forests of Mount Pelion. They felled majestic pine trees. Timber. The smell of resin and sawdust filled the air. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, contributed a special piece of wood. It was a plank cut from the sacred oak of Dodona. They fitted this plank into the prow of the ship. And here is the strange part. The wood could talk. The Argo wasn't just a vehicle. It was a companion. It would whisper prophecies to the crew in the dead of night. Imagine sleeping on deck and hearing the ship murmuring to the waves. Jason sent out a call for heroes, and they came. This was the Avengers of the ancient world. Heracles came, taking a break from his labors. Orpheus came, holding his lyre. Castor and Pollux, the twin sons of Zeus. Peleus, the future father of Achilles. 50 heroes in all. They were called the Argonauts. They launched the ship. The oars splashed in perfect unison. They sailed east, leaving the known world behind. Section 48. The Breathing Rocks. Their journey was long. They stopped at Lemnos, the island of women. They fought 6-armed giants. But the greatest barrier was the Symplegades, the clashing rocks. Imagine a narrow strait of water. On either side, massive black cliffs loom. But these cliffs are not stationary. They are alive. They float on the water, and every few minutes they smash together. Boom. The sound is deafening. The spray shoots hundreds of feet into the air. Then, slowly, grindingly, they pull apart, waiting for the next victim. The Argonauts drifted toward the strait. The water was choppy and dark. They could hear the rocks breathing, a low geological groan. Phineas, a blind prophet they had saved earlier, had given them advice. Send a bird first. Jason released a white dove. The bird flew toward the gap. The sailors held their breath. The rocks sensed the movement. They rushed together. Crash. The sound shook the bones of the crew. The rocks pulled back. The dove had made it, but just barely. The rocks had clipped its tail feathers. "Row!" Jason shouted. The 50 heroes dug their oars into the water. Heave, pull, heave, pull. The Argo surged forward. The rocks began to close again. The shadow of the cliffs fell over the deck. The crew looked up at the walls of stone closing in on them. Orpheus played a fast tempo on his lyre to keep the rowing rhythm. The water churned. The ship groaned. And then, sunlight. They popped out the other side. Behind them, the rocks slammed together one last time, shearing off the ornamental figurehead on the stern. The Symplegades froze forever. They had been defeated. The path to the east was open. Section 49. The Impossible Plow. They arrived in Colchis. It was a strange land. The sun rose earlier here. The air smelled of exotic spices and magic. King Aeetes ruled here. He was the son of the sun god, Helios. He did not want to give up the golden fleece. "You can have it," the king said, "if you plow my field." Sounds easy, Jason thought. "With my bulls," the king added. The bulls were made of bronze, and they breathed fire. "And then," the king continued, "sow these dragon teeth into the soil, and defeat whatever grows." Jason went back to the ship depressed. He couldn't fight fire-breathing metal bulls, but the gods were meddling. Hera and Athena asked Aphrodite for a favor. Aphrodite sent her son, Eros, to shoot an arrow. The target? Medea, the king's daughter. Medea was a sorceress, a priestess of Hecate. She knew the secrets of herbs, shadows, and blood. The arrow hit her. She fell desperately, violently in love with Jason. That night she met Jason in the temple of Hecate. She gave him a jar of ointment. "Smear this on your body," she whispered. "It will protect you from fire and iron for one day." The next morning Jason walked into the field. The bronze bulls charged. Roar, whoosh, flames engulfed Jason. The crowd gasped, but Jason walked through the fire. The ointment worked. He grabbed the bulls by the horns and yoked them to the plow. He plowed the field. He sowed the dragon teeth. From the soil, warriors grew. Skeletons clad in armor, rising silently from the dirt like a crop of death. Medea had told Jason what to do. He threw a rock into the middle of the skeleton army. The skeletons, confusing each other for the enemy, turned their swords inward. They fought each other until they crumbled back into dust. Jason stood alone in the silent field. He had won. Section 50. The Lullaby for the Beast. King Aetes was furious. He planned to kill the Argonauts that night. Medea ran to Jason. "We have to leave, now." "But the fleece," Jason said. "I will get you the fleece," Medea said. They went to the sacred grove. It was a dark, ancient forest. The trees were wrapped in vines. In the center, hanging from a great oak branch, was the golden fleece. It glowed with its own inner light, illuminating the leaves around it. But coiled around the tree was the dragon. It was massive. Its scales were green and gold. Its eyes were yellow lamps that never blinked. It never slept. It watched everything. It saw them. It hissed, raising its head to strike. Jason drew his sword. "Put it away," Medea said. She stepped forward. She didn't use a weapon. She used her voice. She began to sing. It was a low, melodic chant, a song of the night, a song of heavy eyelids and soft pillows. She sprinkled a sleeping potion into the air, dried poppy and valerian. The dragon's head began to sway, left, sway, right. The yellow eyes began to droop. Medea's voice was hypnotic. "Sleep, ancient one. Rest your coils. The night is long." The dragon lowered its head. Its breathing slowed. Ha, shh, ha, shh. For the first time in centuries, the dragon closed its eyes. It slumped against the tree roots, fast asleep. Jason climbed over the sleeping coils. He reached up. He unhooked the golden fleece. It was soft like wool, but heavy like gold. He threw it over his shoulder. They ran back to their Argo. Section 51. The Tragic Escape. They set sail immediately. When King Aetes realized his daughter and his fleece were gone, he chased them. His fleet was faster. He was gaining. Here, the myth gets dark. Medea did terrible things to slow her father down. She killed her brother Absyrtus and scattered his pieces in the sea, forcing her father to stop and collect them for burial. It's a brutal reminder that Medea's help came at a cost. She burned her whole world down for Jason. They returned to Iolcus. They gave the fleece to Peleus, but Peleus refused to give up the throne. So Medea handled it. She tricked Peleus's daughters into killing him. Long story involving a cauldron and a fake rejuvenation spell. The people of Iolcus were horrified. They exiled Jason and Medea. Section 52. The Rotting Hull. They fled to Corinth. For 10 years they lived there. They had children. But Jason was ambitious and maybe a little ungrateful. He decided to divorce Medea and marry the princess of Corinth. He wanted a legitimate kingdom. He told Medea, "I'm doing this for us, for the kids." Medea looked at him. She looked at the man she had betrayed her father for, killed her brother for, used her magic for. And she snapped. She sent a poisoned robe to the new bride. It consumed the princess in fire. Then, in the ultimate act of Greek tragedy, she killed her own children to hurt Jason in the only way left. She fled in a chariot pulled by dragons sent by her grandfather, the sun god. She left Jason standing in the ruins of his ambition. Jason was alone. He had no kingdom, no family, no glory. He became an old wandering man. He used to walk down to the beach at Corinth, where the rotting hulk of the Argo was beached. The wood was gray and worm-eaten. The talking plank was silent. One afternoon, Jason sat in the shadow of his old ship, remembering the golden days, remembering the rowing, the wind, the adventure. He fell asleep. A heavy beam from the stern of the ship, perhaps the very piece damaged by the clashing rocks, broke loose. It fell. It struck Jason, and so died the leader of the Argonauts. Not in battle, but in the shadow of his past glories. The Golden Fleece faded into legend, but the Argo was placed in the stars, sailing the night sky forever. Section 53. The Wedding of the Sea. The Age of Heroes was drawing to a close, but before the curtain fell, the gods decided to throw one last great party. It was a wedding. Peleus, a mortal king and former Argonaut, was marrying Thetis, a sea nymph. The wedding took place on Mount Pelion. Imagine the scene. It was the perfect fusion of earth and sea. The scent of pine needles mixed with the scent of salt spray. The centaurs were there, calm and wise. The muses sang, their voices weaving through the trees like ribbons. Every god was invited. Zeus sat at the head table. Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Apollo. They were all there, drinking nectar, laughing, their skin glowing with divine light. It was a moment of perfect harmony. But there was one goddess who was not invited. Eris, the goddess of discord. She wasn't evil exactly. She was just difficult. She was the feeling of friction, the awkward silence in a conversation, the urge to argue. She stood outside the banquet hall, uninvited. She held a single object in her hand, a golden apple. She plucked it from the garden of the Hesperides. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and perfect. She carved 3 words into the skin. Te Callisti, for the fairest. She didn't storm in. She simply rolled the apple through the open door. Rumble, clack, spin. The apple rolled across the marble floor. It wobbled and came to a stop in the center of the room. The music died. The laughter stopped. 3 hands reached for it simultaneously. Hera, the queen. Athena, the wise. Aphrodite, the beautiful. They looked at each other. The air in the room grew hot. The wedding was ruined. Section 54. The Bored Shepherd. Zeus, realizing that judging a beauty contest between his wife, his daughter, and his aunt was a terrible idea, outsourced the decision. Go to Mount Ida, he said. Ask Paris. Paris was a prince of Troy, but he didn't know it yet. He had been raised as a shepherd due to a bad omen. He was sitting on a rock on a hillside in Turkey, Troy. It was a hot, lazy afternoon. The cicadas were buzzing. Zzz. Paris was bored. He was watching his sheep eat grass. Suddenly, the air shimmered. Hermes appeared, followed by 3 50-foot-tall goddesses. They can change size, but let's imagine them as overwhelming. They presented the apple. You choose, Hermes said. Who gets the fruit? They didn't play fair. They offered bribes. Hera offered power. I will make you High King of Europe and Asia. You will rule the world. Athena offered glory. I will make you the greatest strategist and warrior. You will never lose. Paris was young. Power sounded like work. War sounded dangerous. Then Aphrodite stepped forward. She loosed the clasp of her girdle. The air smelled of roses and sea foam. I don't offer work, she whispered. I offer love. I will give you the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris didn't hesitate. He handed the apple to Aphrodite. In that moment, on a quiet hillside, the fate of thousands of men was sealed. Section 55. The Theft of the Queen. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen. Problem was, she was already married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Paris sailed to Sparta. Menelaus welcomed him as a guest. But when Menelaus left for a funeral in Crete, Paris made his move. Did he kidnap her? Did she run away? The poets disagree, but let's imagine the departure. It was night. The palace was asleep. They crept down to the harbor. The water was black and oily. They boarded Paris's ship. The oars dipped silently into the water. Splash, splash. They sailed east, carrying the treasure of Sparta, leaving dishonor in their wake. When Menelaus returned, he walked into the empty room. He saw the empty bed. He didn't scream. He sat down. His anger was a cold, hard knot in his chest. He called his brother Agamemnon, the high king of Mycenae. "We go to war," Agamemnon said. He had been waiting for an excuse to conquer Troy for years. Section 56. The Reluctant Heroes. They sent messengers to every corner of Greece. Years ago, all the suitors of Helen had sworn an oath, the oath of Tyndareus. They promised to defend Helen's husband, whoever he might be. Now, the bill was due. Odysseus tried to dodge the draft. He was a new father, living happily in Ithaca. When the recruiters arrived, he pretended to be mad. He hooked a donkey and an ox to a plow and started sowing salt into his fields. But Palamedes, a clever Greek, placed Odysseus's baby son in front of the plow. Odysseus swerved to avoid the baby. "You're sane," Palamedes said. "Get in the boat." Achilles tried to hide too. His mother, Thetis, knew he would die if he went to Troy. She hid him on the island of Skyros, disguised as a girl among the princesses. Odysseus found him. He laid out a table with jewelry and one sword. Then he signaled a war trumpet to blow. Blara. The girls ran. Achilles grabbed the sword. "Gotcha," Odysseus smiled. Section 57. The Stillness at Aulis. The fleet gathered at the Bay of Aulis. 1,000 ships. Imagine the sight. A forest of masts stripping the horizon, the hulls painted black and red. The smell of tar, unwashed bodies, and cooking fires. But they couldn't leave. The wind stopped. Day after day, the sea was like glass. The sails hung limp. Agamemnon had offended the goddess Artemis. He shot a sacred deer. The prophet Calchas spoke the terrible truth. The wind will not blow until you sacrifice your daughter, Iphigenia. This is the darkest moment of the myth. Agamemnon struggled. But he was a king first, a father second. He sent for her. He told her she was coming to marry Achilles. She arrived in her wedding dress. She found an altar, not a groom. The sacrifice happened. Some say Artemis replaced her with a deer at the last second. Others say the knife fell true. But the moment the deed was done, the trees began to rustle. A breeze rippled across the water. The sails snapped full. Thwack. The fleet moved. 1,000 prows cut through the water, heading east. Behind them, Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, stood on the shore, watching the ships leave, nursing a hatred that would last for 10 years. Section 58. The Walls of Wind. They arrived at Troy. Troy was not just a city. It was a fortress. It stood on a hill overlooking the plain. Its walls were built by Poseidon and Apollo. They were sheer, smooth, and impregnable. The Greeks beached their ships. They set up camp. For 9 years they fought. It wasn't a constant battle. It was a grind. They raided nearby towns. They sat by fires. They polished their armor. They missed their wives. The Trojans stayed behind their walls. It was a stalemate. Achilles was the greatest warrior. When he took the field, the Trojans ran. Hector was the defender of Troy, noble, family-oriented, burdened by his brother's mistake. Section 59. The Rage of Achilles. In the 10th year, things fell apart. Agamemnon, being greedy, stole a war prize, a girl named Briseis, from Achilles. Achilles was furious, not because of the girl, but because of the disrespect. "Fine," Achilles said. "I quit." He went to his tent. He sat down. He played his lyre. Without Achilles, the Greeks began to lose. The Trojans pushed them back to the beach. They set fire to the ships. Patroclus, Achilles' best friend and soulmate, couldn't watch his countrymen die. "Let me wear your armor," Patroclus begged. "They will think I am you. They will run." Achilles agreed. "But don't go to the walls. Just scare them." Patroclus put on the golden armor. He led the Myrmidons into battle. The Trojans panicked. They thought the god of war had returned. But Patroclus forgot the warning. He chased them to the walls, and there he met Hector. Hector killed him. He stripped the armor. The news reached Achilles in his tent. The sound Achilles made was not human. It was the howl of a wolf. His grief turned into cold, white-hot rage. He got new armor from Hephaestus. He marched out. He didn't fight like a man. He fought like a natural disaster. He choked the river with bodies. He called out Hector. They fought beneath the walls of Troy. Achilles won. He tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged him through the dust. It was a moment of supreme ugliness. The hero had become a monster. Section 60. The Old King's Tears. But the anger broke. One night, King Priam of Troy, Hector's father, crept into the Greek camp. He knelt before Achilles. He kissed the hands that had killed his son. "Think of your own father," Priam whispered. Achilles looked at the old man. The rage drained away, leaving only exhaustion. He wept. He gave the body back. For 12 days there was a truce. They mourned the dead. The fires of the funeral pyres lit up the night sky, reflecting in the eyes of tired men on both sides of the wall. Section 61. The Morning of Silence. One morning, the people of Troy woke up, and the world sounded different. For 10 years, they had woken up to the sound of Greek trumpets, the clash of bronze, and the shouting of men. But today, silence. The seagulls were crying. The waves were lapping against the shore, but the roar of the army was gone. The sentries looked over the walls. The beach was empty. The black ships were gone. The tents were burned, leaving only circles of ash in the sand. The Greeks had left. The gates of Troy opened. Creak. People walked out cautiously, blinking in the sunlight. They walked onto the beach, feeling the sand where their enemies had camped for a decade. And there, standing alone near the shoreline, was the object. A horse. It was colossal. Built of rough-hewn fir planks, stained dark. Its eyes were painted wide and staring. Its mane was carved from wood shavings. It stood on a massive platform with wooden wheels. An inscription was carved into the side. For their return home, the Greeks dedicate this offering to Athena. A debate broke out. "Burn it," said some. "Bring it inside," said others. "It is a trophy." Laocoon, a priest of Poseidon, shouted, "I fear the Greeks even when they bring gifts." He threw a spear at the horse. Thwack. The wood echoed. It sounded hollow. But the gods were done with warnings. 2 serpents rose from the sea and silenced Laocoon forever. The Trojans took this as a sign. The horse was holy. They threw ropes around its neck. They put rollers under the wheels. Heave, grind. Heave, grind. It took all day. They had to tear down part of their own city gate to fit it through. By sunset, the horse stood in the center of the citadel. Troy celebrated. Wine flowed. They danced. They slept the deep, heavy sleep of relief. Section 62. The Belly of the Beast. Night fell. The moon was obscured by clouds. The city was dead silent. Inside the horse, it was hot and cramped. Odysseus was there. Menelaus was there. Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, was there. They heard the snoring of the city. Odysseus reached up. He unlatched the trapdoor in the belly of the horse. Cool night air rushed in. He lowered a rope ladder. One by one, the shadows descended. They moved like ghosts. They killed the sleeping sentries. They opened the gates. Outside, in the darkness, the Greek fleet had returned. They had been hiding just behind the island of Tenedos. They poured into the city. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. Torches were thrown into houses. The fire caught the dry timber. Troy woke up to the smell of smoke and the sound of screaming. King Priam was killed on the altar of Zeus. The women, Hecuba, Andromache, Cassandra, were rounded up in chains. The walls that Poseidon had built were toppled. By dawn, the city of gold was a heap of smoking ash. The greatest civilization of the age was gone, wiped off the map, leaving only a scar on the earth. The war was over, but nobody really won. The Greeks stood in the ruins, covered in soot, looking at a victory that felt empty. Section 63. The Bitter Homecoming. The journey home, the Nostoi, was a disaster. The gods were angry. The Greeks had desecrated temples during the sack of Troy. Poseidon sent storms. Athena sent winds. Menelaus was blown all the way to Egypt. He wandered for years before seeing Sparta again. Agamemnon made it home quickly. He walked into his palace, expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, his wife Clytemnestra prepared a bath for him. She laid out a purple carpet. She gave him a glass of wine. And then, as he lay in the water, she threw a net over him. She struck him with an axe. The King of Kings died naked in a bathtub, killed by the grudge that started at Aulis 10 years ago. And Odysseus? His journey became the definition of an epic. 10 years of wandering. He blinded the Cyclops. He slept with the witch Circe. He sailed past the sirens, tied to the mast, screaming to be set free as their song tore at his soul. He lost every single ship. He lost every single man. He washed up on Ithaca alone, dressed in rags. He had to kill 108 suitors who were eating his food and hitting on his wife, Penelope. When he finally put down his bow, sitting in his great hall, covered in blood, he wasn't a young hero anymore. He was an old, scarred man with a gray beard. The age of heroes ended not with a cheer, but with a sigh. Section 64. The Slow Fade. After the war, the world grew quieter. The demigods died out. The monsters were slain. The gods retreated to Olympus. They intervened less and less. History marched on. The Iron Age took hold. Kingdoms rose and fell. Persia, Alexander, Rome. When the Romans came, they didn't kill the Greek gods. They absorbed them. Zeus put on a toga and became Jupiter. Hera became Juno. Ares became Mars, a more disciplined god of war. The stories remained, but the names changed. The wildness of the Greek imagination was tamed by Roman order. But time is the ultimate god. Even Jupiter could not rule forever. New beliefs rose from the east. A single god, a carpenter's son. The temples were closed. The fires of Hestia were extinguished. The oracle of Delphi gave her last prophecy to the Emperor Julian. Tell the king, the fair wrought house has fallen. No shelter has Apollo, nor the sacred laurel leaves. The fountains are now silent. The voice is stilled. And then, silence. The marble statues were toppled or burned for lime. The bronze was melted down to make coins and cannons. Pan was dead. The great god, Pan, was dead. Section 65. The Dream That Remains. But did they die? Not really. Gods die only when they are forgotten, and the Olympians were never forgotten. They moved. They migrated from the temples of stone into the temples of the mind. They lived on in the stars, Orion, Cassiopeia, Gemini. They lived on in the planets, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Pluto. They lived on in our psychology, narcissism, Oedipus complex, phobias. They hid in the paintings of the Renaissance. They whispered in the poems of Keats and Shelley. They are still here. Every time you watch a movie about a superhero, you are watching Heracles. Every time you read a tragedy, you are watching Oedipus. Every time you look at the ocean and feel small, you are feeling Poseidon. They are the bedrock of our imagination. They are the stories we tell ourselves to understand why we love, why we fight, and why we die. The cool down. And now we have reached the end of the road. The fire on Mount Olympus has dimmed to a soft, glowing ember. The great halls are empty. The cups of nectar are put away. The heroes have hung up their swords and shields. The monsters are sleeping in their caves. The fates have put down their shears. Take a moment to feel the silence around you. It is not the empty silence of chaos. It is a full, rich silence, a silence filled with stories. You have traveled from the void of creation, through the wars of giants, the labors of heroes, and the fall of cities. You have seen the best and worst of gods and men. And now, it is time to rest. Let the images fade from your mind. Let the golden apples roll away into the grass. Let the ships sail over the horizon into the mist. The story is done. The book is closed. You are safe in your bed, anchored in the present, far away from the storms of the Aegean. The stars above you are the same stars that looked down on Odysseus. They will watch over you tonight. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the dark wrap around you like a warm velvet cloak. Sleep well.